All right, it's 3 minutes after the hour. I got a bunch of people on. I'm sure we're going to have more join, but let's go ahead and kick it off. Happy Thursday, everybody. My name is Aaron Kona. I'm the co-founder and managing director here at BWG Connect. We're a networking and knowledge sharing group of thousands of brands who do exactly that. We network and knowledge share together to stay on top of the newest trends, strategies, pain points, even partners they're shaping the digital landscape and growth in it. I connect with 30 plus brands a week to stay on top of the newest trends. And when the same topics come up over and over again, we host an event like this. We'll do close to 240 events in the digital space like this year. And we're just now getting back to in-person events. We're going to do probably close to 100 small format dinners across tier 1 cities next year. So if you're in a large, you're near one of the tier 1 cities, shoot us a note. We'll put you on the invite list. We're great to get back to seeing people in person again. A couple of housekeeping items as we kick this off here. Number one, we're starting 3 to 4 minutes after the hour. And just so you know, we're going to wrap up with 3 to 4 minutes to go in the hour as well. We're going to give you plenty of time to get onto your next meeting without being late. The other thing is we want this to be as educational and informational as possible. So at any point in time you have any questions, drop into the Q&A. You can even drop them into the chat, or you can always email them to me, Aaron, AARON at bwgconnect.com. And we're going to field questions as many ways as we can and ask them in real time. We want to make sure we get as many of those answered as possible. And so that is a kind of like kick off this conversation. The idea of cross-border has come up over and over again. A ton of conversations I'm having, as people have gotten over-indexed on Amazon. Walmart hasn't quite figured it out. Target is very selective in who they work with. A lot of brands on a digital front looking to grow have launched direct to consumer. And as a direct response of that is also, when they find out, hey, wait, we can really perform in this digital space, they've jumped across border, larger overall addressable market, huge opportunity for growth. And so we got some great friends, great partners of the network with Flow, but also with Haus Labs. And so they agreed to jump on the line today and kind of give us an overview of what it looks like. Some of the key things that they see taking place in this cross-border world, but also answer as many questions as we can throw at them. So Molly, I'll kind of kick it off with you. If you want to do a brief intro on yourself,
Sure.
the company, that'd be awesome. Then we can kick it over to Rob and then jump into some of the data here. Sound good?
Yeah, definitely. So nice to meet you guys. Thank you for having me. I'm Molly Rosenman. I'm the VP of Digital at Haus Labs by Lady Gaga. I joined Haus Labs in 2019 and was part of the team that launched the brand. At Haus, I'm responsible for our direct consumer and our Amazon businesses. And prior to joining Haus, I've spent my career in e-com and direct consumer across a number of industries at brands like Vistaprint, The Honest Company, and Swanson Health.
Wonderful. Molly, thanks so much for joining us today. The fearless leader of the digital side of Haus. Look forward to talking to you a lot about your international success over the next hour. My name is Rob Keve. For everyone on the line, I am the co-founder and CEO of Flow. And Flow, for those who don't know, was founded about 6 years ago by myself and my co-founder, Mike Brizek. Mike was one of the co-founders of Gilt Group, one of the early big e-com successes here in the US, and struggled with this very challenge. How do we sell globally in a consumer-first way so that it's a easy, efficient, simple experience for consumers, and brands can find a global audience out there amongst the 9 billion consumers outside of the US. So we're 6 years into our journey. We're doing wonderful things and partnering with brands like Haus Labs, helping them scale globally. And we look forward to telling you more about all of the opportunities and challenges over the next 55 minutes.
Yeah, awesome. So just a quick reminder before we jump into it, drop any questions along the way in real time in the chat, the Q&A, or email them to me, Aaron, AARON at bwgconnect.com. But yeah, let's jump into the slideshow here. That'd be awesome.
Great. So Molly, I know you seem to have worked for a few mission-driven brands in Honest Company, but they don't come much more mission-driven and successful than Haus Labs. Would you be kind enough to introduce Haus to the audience?
Sure, yes, absolutely. So Haus Labs launched in 2019 on houselabs.com and Amazon. We're a color cosmetics brand co-founded by Lady Gaga. And for Lady Gaga, beauty has always been a pivotal part of her story. Growing up, she'll tell you she never felt beautiful, and it was really through beauty, discovery and experimentation with makeup that she was able to find her own beauty and a bravery that she didn't know she had. So our mission is really rooted in Gaga's experience with beauty. It's to spread creativity and bravery and kindness with vegan and cruelty-free tools, really for self-expression and reinvention.
It's amazing. And in doing all of that, creating a hugely successful global business.
Yes, that's the goal.
Flow, we partner with Haus Labs, and that's why we're both here talking to you today. Flow's mission is, I'm afraid, slightly less glamorous, but it's around unlocking the potential for global revenue for brands and helping them accelerate their cross-border opportunities to find global audiences. We do this through four areas where there's an ROI for brands, and there may be some on the line today who are thinking about it. So these four areas typically get pushed. One, localizing the shopping experience, making sure your consumer experience outside of your domestic market is as compelling, as strong, as frictionless internationally as it is domestically. Two, ensuring that your logistics works as seamlessly, which is notoriously a challenge with many different handoffs. Three, to make sure that the revenue side of your international offering competes favorably relative to your domestic market. Many brands, when they look at their international conversion rate and compare that to the domestic, it's, you know, a poor cousin, certainly not in the same family. So we give them the tools and the insights and their handholding through client success to really drive their revenue and conversion rates for international. And finally, we bring that expertise. How do consumers in different countries, what are their expectations? How do they think? How do they buy? What do we need to do to make sure we can improve conversion rates by market?
In that revenue piece, do you think that's because they're traditionally to expand, they've just had to outsource it to maybe a distributor or a partner who doesn't own the brand? I mean,
yeah, it's a good point. I think, yeah, for sure. Some do, some focus on channels or distributors or outsource it. Certainly the early days, the more traditional brands did a lot of that. They gave franchise agreements to regional players and thought, we'll give them the e-com rights, what's that worth? And lo and behold, that's the jewel in the crown that they gave away. And many of them have been buying that back over the last few years. But I think the other side of it is consumers' expectations vary by region and by demographic, as you'd expect. It's not one homogenous group, global. And so how consumers buy in France is different from the US, is different from Brazil. And so you really need a nuanced approach, the right horse for the right course, if you want to have a local experience in 200 different countries.
awesome.
We'll talk about this later, but Flow is a SaaS platform that sits on top of existing e-com platforms. We don't displace it, we augment it. And we do these 6 things, 6 modules behind the Flow platform: localizing the experience, the shopping experience, providing the landed cost, duty and taxes, shipping for international and returns, managing the checkout, all the local payment methods, tools to help optimize conversion rate, and at the top of the funnel, product indication, making sure your product feeds for international markets are localized. So if that's the introductions, let's start with the first few questions. And I guess the right starting point is, why do it in the first place? What's so great about global? Would you like to take that one first, Molly?
Yeah, so I think for us, I mean, from our inception, we intended to be unlike any other beauty brand and break some of the established rules like Gaga does. And I think going global is just one of those things. So, you know, our objective was really to be as accessible as possible and spread our mission as broadly as we could. And while we were building out the brand, one of the things that was the most important to Gaga was that we make our product as accessible as possible. To her, that meant no matter where you lived, you could experience Haus Labs product. So with that in mind, launching globally was actually a necessity of our brand launch. And with, you know, over 100 million social followers across the globe. We had a potential consumer base that was far beyond the bounds of just the US or North America. And some of Gaga's most passionate fans are actually in her international community. They travel from all over the world to see her shows. So it was incredibly important to us to activate and serve that audience. And then finally, we also knew that in order for our message and our mission to have the biggest impact, we needed to have a broad reach. So going global really would allow us to have that.
That's amazing. And I think there's a few takeaways for all of us. One, that if you are truly mission driven, why would that stop at the border? It's anyone out there who's interested in your mission. And if you're evangelizing, you've got an opportunity to reach 9 billion evangelees. Two, if you have a social following, whether you're celebrity driven or not, social media also recognizes no boundaries. And so why wouldn't you be servicing them? If you're trying to make a virtuous cycle in the same way you do domestically, you need to then be able to deliver and service and have a great customer experience to those consumers everywhere. And three, having a brands like Haus Labs who went from a standing start to big internationally is amazing. And we want more of those. But in our experience, isn't typical. It's an atypical success story. Many brands launch international and slowly evolve to a bigger and bigger business, and we help them get there. This was noteworthy because it was one that went from a standing start to enormous traction overnight, thanks to the mission and the fan base and all the things you just mentioned.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Rob, we did not solely build an international business. We essentially launched and had a full-fledged business overnight for international customers. So the impact of launching globally for us was huge. On our very first day of business, we had thousands and thousands of international customers shopping at Haus Labs, and our products were very quickly all over the world. So we've shipped to over 100 countries and territories, so reaching customers across the globe and delivering on our goal of accessibility. And our international response really drastically exceeded our expectations. We see anywhere from 10 to 35% of our total GMV coming from our international customers. That's really dependent on our activations. For example, if we have a major product launch or promotion, our international audience is activated in a huge way for us.
Amazing.
A question that comes in is around the timing. So you had mentioned, this was the overnight experience. What is that? Is that like a year? And then, Rob, what's the typical, people are trying to understand, like they see the total overall opportunity, but they also need to have realistic, goals and expectations set within, executive leadership teams, right? And so, Molly, I'd love to hear, like, was that like a year? When you say overnight, was it months, or is it a week? Was it a year? And I think you kind of mentioned that a little bit. It was like in a week, you had thousands of people, but then Rob, I'd love to hear the typical.
Yeah, I think, we're unique in some ways, right? Because we are a celebrity-driven brand. So when I talk about it, I actually mean overnight, right? we literally launched with thousands of people waiting to buy product. And so, that is certainly unique. I think one thing I'll just say about it, though, is, while we were able to have a very large business overnight, we did not have a large team, right? We were a small and scrappy startup with, not enough time and huge goals and not enough people and resources. And so I think a point that I think is very important is that while, we had this, international business overnight and we exceeded our expectations, it wasn't that we weren't able to handle that, right? Because we had the platform and the flow of support to run the business and, essentially supplement our team. So while I think, the expectation, and Rob can probably talk about what a more traditional trajectory looks like, maybe might not be overnight for everyone. I think the idea that you could go global with a small, scrappy team is probably the most important thing I'd say in terms of, and we'll talk about the challenges, but you know, when I first thought about this, I'm like, I'm going to have a team of 20 people to manage global, and that certainly is not the case. So I don't know, Rob, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah. So I think your point is well made. We built Flow to make it easy for brands to go global. If you were trying to do all the things we're going to come on to talk about, local currency, rounding, duty tax classification, cheap shipping, fast shipping, returns, customer service, payments, fraud, it would take a brand measured in years, I don't know how long. And the purpose of us as a SaaS business is, of course, to build it once and to build it great for everyone to leverage. So then the only question for brands is how quickly will it take us to integrate? And the answer to that is it varies, but it's measured in weeks, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe. Certainly not a multi-month project. And then when you go live, you may not have the enormous GMV that House had in the first week, but brands build over time. They've usually got a significant portion of their site traffic coming from overseas. And you can easily look at that. What's the split of my traffic from comparing domestic to international? And it's not uncommon to see 10%, 20%, even 30%, and yet very little international sales. And so the idea behind Flow is it makes it a localized shopping experience for consumers in 200 different countries as soon as you've done the implementation overnight, and each country will be configured to its own experience. And then they too can start capitalizing on the traffic that's already hitting their site.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, it's solving for so many of the issues that hold people back, right? And Molly, I'm glad you addressed the team size, which is the other one. How many people do I need to hire, right? It's, yeah. So another question that comes in, how did you manage compliance related to product registrations, language, packaging for so many different countries?
Yeah, so I think that was a big one. We had, you know, our product development team, regulatory team, really worked to make sure we were in compliance with everything we needed. That was a major lift up front, but obviously important.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Let's keep going. At Flow, on answering the question, why go global? The answer is, of course, that consumers are global. If you're not reliant on bricks and mortar, why would you not? The internet is global. Most of the media channels with which we'll meet them, most paid marketing extends to global. So if 86% of the world has internet and buys online, it's a big opportunity to go out and reach them and not rely on just the 300 million US-based consumers. More than that, not only is e-commerce accelerating, but cross-border demand is accelerating, outstripping even e-com. So we all know that e-com was ramping up all the way to the start of the pandemic, and through the pandemic accelerated further. And interestingly, cross-border even outstripped that. More consumers are purchasing for the first time internationally, and those that already have are becoming more habitual buyers cross-border. And really the only reason they wouldn't is if the shopping experience didn't feel local. It begged questions, was expensive, seemed risky, seemed unnatural. The more it emulates a domestic experience with local currency, clean pricing, clear duties and taxes displayed on the site, cheap shipping, easy to pay, why wouldn't you? And why would you have any regard for where the brand is? And so that's, I think, why we're starting to see such an enormous growth in the cross-border e-com market. And this is pulled from a study of ours, just comparing the pre-pandemic to post-pandemic percentage of cross-border shoppers by market. And of course, it varies by market, but it's interesting, every single one of these is up in the last 2 years. And the average, I think, is 76% in these markets have purchased cross-border. So this is not an early adopter market. It's not, you know, just the few millennials who will purchase cross-border. It's the vast majority. And finally, to answer the question, what are the signs as to when you should be thinking about going global? One is the first point I mentioned before. Look at your international site traffic. If it's relatively high, but when you compare it to your international sales, it seems disproportionately low. That's obviously an opportunity to close that gap. Two, depending on your category and segment, is there strong international demand? Usually there are good signs that there's strong demand outside of your domestic market. Three, diversifying. This came up a lot in the last few years, particularly as we went through COVID restrictions, varying by market. it was really interesting to see the heat map of demands changing. And if you're not dependent on just the US domestic market, you have the opportunity to benefit from other markets which are booming or in a different point in their cycle relative to domestic, and be more diversified. For consumer awareness, whether you're celebrity driven or not, consumers are probably becoming aware of your brand, word of mouth, advertising, other forms of social media. And it's a shame not to capitalizing on it if they're aware of your brand and maybe even hitting your site. And finally, preempting competition. Obviously, the earlier you get into the markets, the less breathing space you give to competition. So with that, why don't we move to the second question, Molly, which talks about the pain points. And what are some of the challenges that we face when we sell cross-border?
There were a number of challenges. I think, again, we talked about this a little bit, but first, with limited resources, the idea of potentially managing multiple websites for different countries was a tremendous undertaking and something we just didn't have the ability to do. That said, we wanted to have control of the shopping experience at a country level. So we sort of needed a platform that would allow us to be both hands-off, but also very particular about the experience, which is a tall ask. And because we plan to launch on Amazon in some international countries as well, it was important that we manage pricing so that our consumer experience would be consistent across our markets, across our channels. So we needed to have some control over pricing. And then we knew calculating taxes and duties and managing shipping restrictions and regulations for all of the countries would be extremely complex. That was a huge, huge one for us. And if that weren't complicated enough, we also were launching with a pre-order experience, which meant we needed a platform solution partner that could handle pre-orders for cross-border shoppers, which was not easy to find at all. And then I think lastly, it was incredibly important to us that all of our shoppers had a consistent experience, no matter where they were shopping. We have always wanted to make sure that our international community did not feel like an afterthought. We wanted them to have all the same features, functionality, and experiences that were available to a domestic consumer.
Great. Apologies, I seem to have come out of presentation mode. Great. That's wonderful, Molly. Thanks for being transparent. Yeah,
just a few
challenges,
right?
And I love how thoughtful House was and you were about, we want to get this right first time. We don't want to start off in a sort of basic walking way or crawling and then walk and then run. We really want from the outset the international consumer not to be an afterthought, but as much of a core thought as our domestic consumers. And you need to get so much right. And I think the point here is we'll come on to talk about how to solve that. And obviously that's why we're both here today, because it is a partnership and we can leverage our platform to solve these things. But if you're trying to do it alone, these are just some of the checklist items you need to give thought to. Otherwise, you do find it's a very disjointed experience shopping internationally, and we've probably all felt that as consumers. And you'll, as a result, see much lower international sales. And I always think that it's not just that you'll see poor international sales because the shopping experience is so clunky and maybe expensive, but you're losing a potential lifetime customer. Once they've had a bad experience, they've had a carrier on their doorstep asking for duties and taxes, an amount they didn't even know it was, are they really going to order from you again? Or have you just lost someone who was going to become an avid fan of your brand?
I mean, the managing multiple websites has come up a few times now, where that's the most daunting thing. I know, calculating taxes and duties, right? Shipping restrictions, usually you can find somebody to solve for, but the management of multiple websites, like right now, is just, that's a tough one, right? I mean,
yeah, with a small team, it's essentially impossible.
Right. I mean, yeah, nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And just a quick reminder as we get kind of like halfway, well, not quite halfway through, but halfway past the hour here. If you have any questions along the way, keep dropping them into the chat, the Q&A, or email them to me, Aaron, aaron@bwgconnect.com. We'll keep getting them answered. Awesome.
And we'll come back to the multiple website challenge, but many of the more traditional brands who didn't have the benefit of starting greenfield or weren't as forward thinking as many digital native brands historically have set up many country level sites. And it sounded appealing 10 years ago. Why wouldn't we just set up a UK site if we're so focused on the UK? But you have many challenges there. One, that's a never-ending argument, and how many are you going to set up? And two, managing particularly things like merchandising and inventory when you're managing different sites, as well as things like promotions and coordinating them across them. As Molly said, the complexity just becomes exponential and becomes unmanageable very quickly. The more general case of what are the challenges of cross-border, and this is pulled from a study we did. Please feel free to reach out if you want the full study. This shows what consumers report as pain points, barriers to shopping internationally. And it's largely the same as what Molly was describing from the merchant side. Shipping's too expensive, delivery's too slow, the duty and taxes are either not displayed or seem high, the exchange rate seems off, and so I'm going to delay my purchase, and whilst I check that out and maybe not purchase as a result. The site, particularly checkout, isn't translated, so I'm nervous. The price isn't listed in my local currency. I can't pay with the payment method I want, so I've got all the way to checkout with a cart, but can't pay because I don't have a card, for instance, or the local currency challenge. So if we move into more constructive mode, if that's the challenges, how do we create really good local shopping experiences so that consumers feel comfortable and comforted in transacting? Molly, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is tailoring experiences to match consumer preferences in certain markets. And I think this is most importantly in an automated way, right? So the first thing I'd call out is localizing pricing. So localizing pricing based on IP address, so customers can shop in their own currency. So rather than, you know, having multiple sites to show all of these different prices, that's changing based on recognizing the user and showing them their right currency, right? Also offering the right preferred payment types like Klarna or other popular payment methods in certain markets. And again, like without having to know anything about what payment types are popular in each market, because with a tool like Flow, that's automatically going to be presented to consumers based on what market they're in. And pricing displays, right? Whether duties and taxes should be included or excluded in prices. It differs by market and country, and it's just another thing that, you know, is a very tricky thing to manage across markets if you don't have an automated way to do this. And then on the pricing side of things, we use price books to set pricing in key markets. So we're aligning with the competitive landscape versus just letting currency conversion decide the fate of our prices, and also to create consistency across our selling channels, so consumers don't see different prices and different channels for the same products and have a pretty poor brand experience. And then managing shipping restrictions and shipping methods and updating these as Flow makes us aware of changes, right? Instead of having to stay on top of all of these things, we have a partner who does that for us. We've also leveraged Flow's custom messaging by market to inform shoppers of any critical information like delays, which was incredibly important during the pandemic, especially the early days when there were many carrier delays that we needed to let our customers know about. Again, like this is all without development work and automatically based on your IP and experience that you're in. And then I think finally, just A/B testing key touch points of the customer journey. So our customers can tell us what experience works best for them and is going to make them the most likely to convert and spend more. So that's, you know, another functionality that for a lot of data-driven brands is super important. Setting up A/B tests with like an Optimizely or another tool at the country level and managing that would be extremely difficult, but it's built into the Flow platform.
Thank you, Molly.
We got a question that comes in too. Can you guys have a discussion on paid media strategy and channels? So I don't know if you're testing and marketing there, you know, tailor messaging different than the US.
Yeah, so we we're kind of a little bit of a unique story here where we've actually just started testing international marketing this year and testing in Canada first. So we definitely tailor marketing differently in Canada, but really we've driven our international business very organically until this year. So we're sort of in a pilot mode, but our early results are showing really strong performance in the Canada market. So we're seeing triple-digit year-over-year growth in Canada with a start, just, really just taking our first steps into advertising in Canada. So definitely a growth opportunity and definitely a difference maker. But again, a lot about prioritization and, that's sort of when I feel like you get to, okay, what are the key markets and where do I want to be really intentional versus, how can I take the demand that exists and serve the customer better? So I think that's sort of the next path and opportunity for us. Rob, I don't know.
Great. Yeah, we deeply integrate into the Facebook and Google portfolio. And because we help localize catalogs, we localize the product feeds. And that becomes important if you want to do any paid marketing on either platform, because they need the two to be in sync at all times. And when you're dealing with different currencies and duty and taxes, it's very easy to get out of sync. And we've seen some great results across brands. I think we've got some case studies at the end, but we've seen ROASs in the 300–400%. Not all the time, not in every market, but the beauty of international is it's 200 different markets of different sizes behaving differently. And so you can pick up on inefficiencies and really find some deep, rich seams out there.
Yeah, and the product, I think, especially for Google, is pretty great, right? The feed is in the proper currency. All of that is just automatic, right? So you can test markets, turn them on and off as you see strong or not strong performance.
And Molly, can I ask if you wouldn't mind just talking about the last point of bullets on your page? At Flow, we're very proud of the deep stack A/B testing facility that we have to test all kinds of different things, from pricing to shall we include duty and tax or not? Shall we test different shipping, flat level shipping rates? Shall we test different promotions? Shall we test different payment methods? What's been your experience? Have you had a chance to do some A/B testing? And if so, what kind of results have you seen?
Yeah, we have. I think the biggest things we've focused on testing are things like including and excluding duties and taxes, because that's one where we know it makes a big difference. And I think one of the great things is we rely a lot on your team to help guide our A/B test roadmap versus having to kind of come up with the insights across markets. We have, the Flow team say, hey, here's what's been working with other merchants in certain markets, and then we sort of use that to guide our roadmap. So I'd say like the duties and taxes piece has been probably the most impactful for us, where we've seen strong results and then end up with some differentiated experiences and creating new experiences that we might not have before based on, learnings. But that's probably the biggest area that we've seen an impact in.
That's great. And for those who aren't aware, Molly's referring to this simple opportunity to just test both rounding and whether you should include duty and tax in your local product price or display it separately or display it at checkout. All of those are configuration options with us at Flow. And so you can test, even though we may be used to seeing sales tax included in the product price in the UK, for instance, does it perform better? Would you get better conversion rate to show a lower product price and sales tax as a separate item? What about duties when you're selling into Australia? They have de minimis thresholds. Do you show it or do you not show it? So you can test all of those and see what works best. And some brands will say, we saw 30% uplift by testing it, and we're now going to change our pricing to the alternative. And similarly, you can do different price points and rounding. It's always fascinating to me that different countries have quite different conversion rates, depending on whether you're rounding to 0.99, 0.00, 0.98. And so all of these things are testable, and the client success team that Molly was referring to have playbooks. So they put their arms around clients and talk to them about what they suggest. I'm glad to hear that Joey is doing a good job for you.
He's wonderful. I can't say enough good things about Joey.
I mean, in all reality, I mean, that's what people should be doing even on their own D2C site as well, right? It's something that's been lost. You know, you get the real-time data on your site, right? You get it, which is, you know, something that's lost when you're selling through brick and mortar or Amazon.
Right.
You can do this real time across multiple different aspects and, you know, carve out, you know, any me search you're doing and actually collect the data, right? Or what your team thinks is going to work best. You actually get the data. Yeah, I agree with Rob. It's always interesting to see what comes back when you see afterwards.
Yeah. We sorry, go on, Molly.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you mentioned analytical, and I know Haus Labs is very analytical, and we love that at Flow. We're analytical. When people ask us what's going to happen to French consumers when we change this price, our answer is always, let's test. We can tell you what's worked in the past. We'll look at the data, but we're not going to have an uninformed decision. We've got rich data and we can test in minutes. So why wouldn't we see what the data says?
Right. I mean, it's not like the old days of printing a catalog where you print it, it's gone, right? It's literally, like you're saying, minutes. It's an hour, it's a day, and flip it back and collect the data. Oh, love it. Love it.
In a lot of ways, it's easier to test in our international markets than it is on our US site, just because so much is built into the Flow platform, which is kind of a funny thing. But I was just going to say, you know, like, of course, managing an A/B testing program is so important for an e-commerce brand. Managing it across, you know, many markets is where it gets extremely complicated if you don't have a tool, right, that's automated and you can just say, you know, I want this to round to 0.5 or 0.0 and set it, you know, or somebody on the customer success team sets it live for you, you know. So we have a lot of tools that are
and it's also a quick question. So it's all customizable by country or region?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. And as Molly said, that's important for international because there's 200 different markets. And if you were to make a change across all of them, some would benefit from the change and some would lose. So instead, get the right setting for the right market. And there's always opportunity to improve. And to your point, Aaron, it is strange, as Molly said, how for domestic markets, many brands either aren't able to or haven't got the ability to test these basic things. What's the price elasticity of your price points? What should you round to? Should you include sales tax or not? What performs better, flat rate shipping or funding duties as a duty-free promotion? Even the order of different payment methods can make a big difference to conversion rates. And when we proudly boast about brands having grown in the hundreds of percents, it's usually not because they will get a lift initially from turning Flow on, but the really big increases happen over time. You test different things and we grow into the perfect experience. We won't be able to find it day one.
Awesome. Love it.
More data on terms of what's important to the consumer for their consumer experience. Nearly 3/4 talk about their preferred payment methods. So here they're often talking about buy now, pay later, or digital wallets, or a local payment method like Ideo or Klarna or SEPA. And so it's important to us that we can help our clients with surfacing the right payment methods and checkout by country. Returns, very important for international. Historically, they weren't able to do returns internationally. If you want to have a good, easy consumer purchase, you need to be able to offer returns. And of course, we do. Pricing components and shipping methods, many shipping methods. And just a word on shipping methods, it's always powerful to be able to offer a fast and a cheap. International usually has only had the express, which tends to be expensive. And I think if you're really democratizing this to the world, you want to be able to offer a cheap or even free shipping method, just like we do domestically. I think I don't want to spend our time selling Flow, so I'm not going to focus on this slide, but Flow is divided into 6 modules, which together form the Flow platform that deliver everything that Molly was kind enough to refer to. I will spend just a quick word on how quickly can you be live and what is the tech platform. How quickly or how long did it take you to get live, Molly? Do you remember?
I think it was 4 weeks.
4 weeks. Great. And do you remember what that experience was like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty straightforward in terms of the integration. I think, where the real work starts is once you're live and start to optimize the experiences. I think at the beginning, right, as we said we want to launch globally, I think our heads were spinning like, what are the right default settings?
Exactly.
And I think your team really took the lead in helping us kind of based on what has been done in the past, what's worked in the past. So I'd say like that was a moment of being very overwhelmed to set up all of the settings, but really at the end of the day, we didn't have to do most of it. So I think that was really great and helpful. And then again, like the optimization really comes as you start to see data and start to test, because as you said, we didn't get everything right at the beginning, and we changed things as we learned.
Great, perfect. And I love that you're leaning into the testing and changing and improving continuously.
Yeah.
So Flow is pre-built into most e-commerce platforms to make the onboarding quick and easy. We do weekly releases. We technically do dozens of releases a day, but the big feature ones are weekly. We have a continuous improvement cycle built into our organization here at Flow. It's very focused on growth. So we talked about A/B testing. You can control your site experience with over 100 different controls. So it's all configuration option. If you want to change the look and feel of some of your pricing or checkout, ordering of payment methods, that's all controllable just by going onto console and moving things around or asking your client success person to do that. And of course, it's extremely scalable and enterprise ready. So we do all of this, address all the challenges, not just to maintain a large fan base, but to turn them into paying customers. So I'd love to spend a few minutes just on the results and the ROI behind going global.
Definitely. So the first thing I'll just say is, especially going global with Flow, right? We found an awesome partner. I think for us, one of the key differentiators when we selected our cross-border partner was the type of partnership we'd get, the team. And that was a huge differentiator for Flow. We knew that their team would be there to support us and supplement our small but mighty team. And I don't think I've said this, but there were 2 people on the digital team when we launched. So very small but mighty. And they definitely were. We launched our brand at midnight Pacific time and on a Monday morning. So the Flow team spent the entire day Sunday with us and up till midnight Pacific time, launching, preparing and launching the brand. So truly have been great partners. And then again, like being able to leverage the expertise on A/B test ideas, settings for markets that, frankly, we don't know much about, right? But want and know we want to serve was very helpful at launch. And I think, we've truly been able to create an international experience that I'd say is in near parity to the US experience, which was really what we set out to do. So things that we didn't think might be possible, like when we decided we wanted to create a build your own bundle, build your own set, Flow helped us create that functionality for international as well. So that's resulted in a happy international customer, but definitely, something unique that we couldn't get from every partner. And most importantly, our international sales have exceeded our expectations. So we've seen almost 40% increase in conversion rate year over year, which is typically a very hard metric to move. And we saw some pretty incredible performance, especially during holiday last year. So during the holiday timeframe, our international audience was converting at like a 4% conversion rate, peaking at like 7%, which if you had told me that, I would have thought that was impossible, especially for beauty. The average is like 2.5 for a mostly domestic business, right? So we've been able to actually provide an experience that, has few enough hurdles that an international customer would convert like a domestic customer or better than. And, even with a very big brand launch in 2019, we still saw a 45% increase in international GMV year over year. In a pandemic year, while the color cosmetics category was down and hurting year over year. So definitely, had a very great and exciting launch, but have been able to continue to grow with Flow as a partner.
That's amazing. It doesn't get much stronger economically than that. I mean,
It's been very fun to watch.
I mean, 4% to 7% conversion rate, that feels like it's almost unheard of.
Yeah, I mean, I could not believe my eyes.
It's a really quick, a question comes in around, testing the platform. Is it a test and learn, or is it an all in? So I guess that's for you, Rob.
I'm not sure I understand the question around all in.
So I'll try to pull it out. I guess how I read it is, you launch with a single, cross-border, one country at a time, or is it in this case, 33?
Oh, I see.
You go with the entire product catalog, like what is
sure.
Yeah.
So Flow set up to, once you've done the integration, 200 countries are there and available for you to turn on at your heart's content. So you can toggle 200 on day one, or you could do a wave of the top 30 markets, see how they perform, optimize them, and then a wave 2 of the rest of the world. I think those are the most two common models, either turn on the world and make sure everyone can purchase in a localized way from the outset, or do an 80-20, pick up the biggest markets first and then roll out the rest of the world.
So one other question is around, are there the top product categories that you see it working the best for?
It's yes. So apparel, accessories, health, beauty, specialty items, sports goods, homewares, typically anything which isn't perishable, or at least we don't focus on perishable. I'm not sure it lends itself perfectly to cross-border, and anything which isn't too heavy, both of which have their own shipping challenges. So I would say if your average order value is, north of $30 with no upper limit, shipping should be a low percentage of the total landed cost, and it should be very shippable. And so it should lend itself to cross-border. And I think the more your product is special or unique, or has a very specific position in the market, the more you find that international demand is natural and there waiting for you.
Awesome. Just a reminder, if others have questions, keep emailing them to me, Aaron, aaron@bwgconnect.com, or drop in the Q&A or the chat there. We'll keep getting them answered.
Great. I think we've got a few case study slides here. Being British, I'm not too comfortable boasting about all the successes, but I'll flick through them and let's pretend I presented them. We've had great successes with other clients. That's for a different day. Today, I'd much rather talk about the success at House. There's no end to this. Here we go. Great. What's next? It's an amazing first chapter, but as they say, that was before lunch. What are you going to do for the rest of the day? What's the next chapter look like, Molly?
Oh, there's still so much to do. I think, continuing to test, especially things like, there's a whole number of things in the playbook that we haven't touched on testing, right? Like one of the ones I'm most excited about is merchandising payment types on PDPs, which payment types, especially for certain markets, are just such a huge driver for international. So that's one that's on our roadmap upcoming. Expanding localized marketing. I think we talked about this a little bit, but we have really just tipped our toes into international marketing. And again, it's relatively easy to set up and get up and running. So that's one that is just a huge opportunity for us. Optimizing shipping thresholds and methods. I think we've done a little bit of this, but still have a long way to go in making sure we have the right thresholds and shipping methods by each market. Again, I feel like we could test duties and taxes all day, every day on all of the markets. So we still have work to do there. And then, most importantly is activating our international consumers during the upcoming holiday, which we are, well underway with that.
Amazing. I can't wait to see what the result is. And a few points, just picking up on what you were saying, Molly. one, bear in mind, if you're selling internationally, the international consumers' holidays may be different from the US.
Yes.
And targeting them for their holidays is always a good idea.
Definitely. Yeah, and shipping, right, takes a little bit longer. So when you think about holiday shipping deadlines and things like that, super important to consider the international timelines. And I think that's just one of the things that we've always just made sure we do is for everything we're doing, ask the question, what about international? Because, you know, where it comes, you know, shipping timelines, delivery deadlines, holidays, even like thinking about our holiday offers, you know, if you create deals that only work for your domestic customer base, then you can't talk about the deals for your international customer base. It's just difficult to then see success with that customer.
That's a great point. So even things like promotions, before you do any of them, you'll think about its global applicability. Otherwise,
Exactly.
a tweet may be wasted on all the international consumers.
Yep, exactly.
Fantastic. And just picking up on what you're saying on things like the payment methods on the PDP. So there's a big opportunity to put well-known payment methods in line on the product pages. And we mentioned some of them before. Klarna plays well in Sweden, Afterpay plays well in Australia, and Ideal in Holland.
Right.
And these drive consumers forward. They means it's a familiar payment method. They know they'll be able to transact, even if they haven't yet put it in cart.
Yeah, and I think many brands have tested that for Afterpay and Klarna in the US, and has a similar impact, right, in the other countries that have either those payment methods that are popular or others that you might not have heard of.
Exactly. And the shipping threshold is the last one I was going to pick up on. Very important. Some consumers' expectations on shipping, both timeline and cost, vary by market, often driven by the size of their market. So a large market like Australia may be less sensitive to paying shipping and more sensitive to other aspects, product price and duties. And also looking at your shipping thresholds relative to de minimis thresholds, where de minimis, Molly knows, but for anyone who is not familiar, some countries have a level below which you won't pay duties or sometimes tax, and above it you do. So if you add enough items to your cart, you may go from not paying duties to paying for them. And so bearing that in mind when you're setting your shipping threshold for free shipping is sometimes a good idea for maximizing conversion.
Awesome. I can see we're almost at time here. You know, we're just, you know, as we kind of think about like key takeaways. And I don't know if there's another slide here, but, you know, would love to kind of hear those as, oh, perfect. You know, you guys are great friends, partners, supporters of the network. Really appreciate you and the help you're giving to a ton of brands in it. But as we go to kind of like key takeaways, you know, Molly, I'll kick it over to you first, and then kick it over to Rob, and we can wrap up here. Sound good?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is going global. Sounds very overwhelming at first blush, and there's a lot to consider. But I would say if you leverage a partner like Flow that has the technology and a team to support your goals, it is much easier than you might think. A little upfront work, and again, obviously, like lots to consider, but it has been much easier of a process than I thought. And I worked at many brands that had international businesses that we built custom sites and proprietary software and all of that. And this has been by far the simplest and least complex way to do it. And so I would just say, you know, don't be concerned at the very initial reaction you might have to going global before you kind of learn a little bit more.
Yeah, awesome. And more than happy to connect anybody with Molly after the call as well for
Definitely.
a follow-up conversation, you know, networking, knowledge sharing. You know, Rob, you know, encourage everybody to have a follow-up conversation with the team at Flow as well. Great friends, partners, supporters of the network, and a ton of brands in it, all around resident experts in this space, and worth putting 30 minutes at least on the calendar to kind of hear what they're doing, because they've simplified this incredibly complicated space as a whole. Rob, key takeaways here, and you know, you said people can get a copy of the study you did.
Yeah, absolutely. Please reach out. We'll send that and plenty of other white papers that you may find interesting for how to do international with us or yourself. I think driving off of Molly's points that it need not be painful and overwhelming. We can partner you through it, and the technology is ready for it. is just to remind yourself about how big the opportunity is. We saw from Molly's experience that they went from 0 to 100 miles an hour in no time at all, and then grew another 50% beyond that. And there are huge opportunities out there. Look at your site traffic, see how much demand you've already attracted to your site. Those could all be paying customers. There's no reason that shouldn't be that percentage of your revenue coming from overseas. So look at it. You're never too young or too small to think about global. And if you're not doing it as well as Haus Labs are, we'd love to speak to you and see if we can help you as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks again, Molly. Thanks, Rob, for your time today. All the information you're open to sharing, as well as answering all the questions we threw at you over the past hour. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Hope everybody has a fantastic Thursday. Everybody take care, stay safe. Look forward to having you at a future event. Look for a follow-up email from us. I'll put you in touch with Molly and Rob and the team over at Flow. Everybody take care. Look forward to having you at a future event. All righty. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.